Second of all, I'm proud to be the Dean Facilitator for Illuminate. This is an amazing conference, and the most amazing is that we sold out. More space. And I think you've already discovered that however much you like or don't like the panels, the lunch tables are where things are happening. So we're now recreating the lunch table here, and in a minute, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to make an opening statement, introduce these people, these three wonderful women. Each of them is going to talk for 8 to 10 minutes, and then we're going to be available for your questions because we're under orders to get back to the other room on time. Now, that said, I'm going to now make two different public announcements. One is for all of the people who were tracking this ridiculous piece of legislation in the House. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. But if you do, I want to say, first of all, yes, it's a threat to nonprofits. First of all, the bad news is it's still passed. The good news is I don't think there's any chance of it passing the Senate. But more to the point, the reason I'm announcing it is that there was an extraordinary mobilization by a lot of organizations, many of them Jewish, in the last week, and they switched. 52 people voted wrong last time who were Democrats. I have no idea what was in their heads, but 52 Democrats voted for this last week, and 39 of those people switched their vote. And that's an amazing testament to organizing, and it just should make you feel good. And the second thing that should make you feel good is you know that there is a new member of Congress who is trans and is being threatened by the Republicans. And John Fetterman, you know who he is, he's a crazy senator. Made a public announcement that she can use his bathroom anytime she wants. It's really important. This is the kind of stuff.
Absolutely. I like that.
This is the kind of stuff that really makes a difference. So those are two testaments to like speaking out and organizing well.
I'm sorry, it also said Dick's just withdrew his.
Hey!
That Gates just withdrew. Oh, so good. Okay, but now it's down.
Oh,
my dear. I know.
Thank you, Wendy. That's a third announcement, and that's even bigger and very important. And I want to say why it's important. It's important because the president, I mean, I'm not inside their heads, but they were using this as a decoy. There's no chance that the United States Senate is weird and it's under Republican control. There's no chance they would have confirmed this guy. And so, because it's too easy a position for their opponents in the next election. I think the common wisdom is correct, that the president nominated him, first of all, because he owed him something, and second of all, because it would have been a decoy in the sense that would have gone through the whole confirmation, then he would have been rejected, which I think would have happened, then people would feel badly for the president-elect, and he could make some new moves. So I actually think it's great that Gates took himself out of the running. That's wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so we operate, all of us, every single one of us, on several different planes, and if you were here this morning, there were some really good broad discussions about women, different women. You heard me talk about all the women who aren't in this room. Those women are very much the concern of the women on this panel. So it's not like they don't connect to you. It's not like they don't care about the ERA or trafficking or abortion rights. You do. But just, I always want you to keep in mind on most of these issues, and I don't want to step on anyone's toes, if you have a trans child and you're thinking about whether to leave the country, our hearts are with all of them. But most of the women that the members of the cohort, which is what Julie is and Lori is, and most of the women that the 60 cohort members for Illuminate over the last 6 years, most of the women who are our concern are women whose needs are greater and whose life is more endangered than most of the people in this room. So we can have those, if we were in small groups, we could have that longer discussion. But to be here, whomever you are, to be here is a matter of some privilege compared to the women that you will be hearing about or worrying about. It's not like these women aren't going to speak to things that are in your favor and your interest. And it's not, and I'm definite that I want you to get engaged with one or more of them. But I want you to understand in each case that they have on their mind lots of women who have much less privilege and many fewer resources than any of us do. It's just important to have that frame. Okay. They are, I think you would know who they are, or you wouldn't be here. The bios are all on the QR code if you can access it. But I'm going to ask them to speak, actually not in the order in which they're sitting. I'm going to ask Lori to speak first, then Julie, and then ask Marcy to go last, because she's got the more of the umbrella issue. And now just again, they're going to talk to you directly about what's on their mind, what's their concern, and what it is they're doing. And to the extent that they don't have time or they don't remember to tell you what you should be doing, that will be what I will come back to. Lori.
Great. Thanks so much, Ruth. It's such an honor and a privilege to be here and see many familiar faces and advocates in this field, and also talk to many of you where I think it's an issue that will resonate with all of us, but it may be a new issue in terms of what are we doing here in the United States. So my name is Lori Cohen. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Protect All Children from Trafficking. We are at once somewhat of a legacy organization. We were the first organization in the United States created to raise awareness about child sex trafficking and exploitation. And we're also a startup in that I joined 5 years ago. We recently renamed ourselves. We were known as PACT, which is an acronym that both no longer stands for anything and is very difficult to pronounce. And I would spend a lot of time explaining that, and I decided we need to rebrand. So we're now Protect All Children from Trafficking, which means something and is pronounceable. So, and we can have all sorts of fun development issues about making impact, right? So PACT to PACT, got it. How did I come to this space? I am an attorney, as you saw in the video, and I spent many years representing victims of trafficking and exploitation. But what I'll share with you is that when I started, I didn't know that I was representing victims of human trafficking. I didn't know what human trafficking was. I hadn't heard about it. I didn't know this was an issue. To the extent that I had heard about this thing, child prostitution, what's happening in Asia, and some of you I've met while I've been here, people typically ask, are we doing work abroad? And we do have partnerships abroad. We're part of a global network, and I work very closely with my partners in a number of countries, but our focus is trafficking here in the United States. And I came to this issue because I had been representing women who were fleeing domestic violence situations. I was at an organization that may be familiar with many of you, Sanctuary for Families.
Oh, yes, right.
And I was in, I'm going to say the word, Ruth, I know I can't think of another way. I was in the immigration division. I was working with immigrant clients. So
try getting used to new Americans.
yeah, they were, but the law was not new American law. It was immigration law.
Go ahead.
And there was a specific type of visa that was available for what was known as battered women. And that concept's grown. So I had all these Spanish-speaking clients, because I speak Spanish, who were fleeing domestic violence situations. And it took me about a year to understand that part of the abuse they were suffering, there was physical abuse, there was sexual abuse, there was tremendous violence, and all sorts of psychological torture, was that many of my clients were actually being sold for sex to other men in the community here. And we didn't have a word for it, they didn't have a word for it. And I finally realized, after working with one client where her abuser kept tormenting her from jail, and he was eventually deported because he just was so abusive, and jail wasn't going to stop him from tormenting her, that what she had experienced was trafficking. And it made me really look back at what did I miss? Why did I not understand this? How could I become educated? But this client had been interviewed by the police. The police had sent her to the mayor's office, which had a domestic violence division, and was meeting in the domestic violence division. She had been to a hospital for her injuries, which were significant. And all along the way, before she came to me, nobody had connected the dots to realize that what she was experiencing was, yes, domestic violence, and also sex trafficking. So I was able to work within Sanctuary to develop a program that we could identify this, but then we also started going out and educating law enforcement, talking to prosecutors about could they bring charges for trafficking, talking about issues around demand. The police were routinely arresting my clients, but not arresting the men who were in the room with the clients. And the police would say, put your pants on and go home to your wife. Like, that's literally what they would say. And so how do we educate physicians? How do we educate social workers in hospitals? How do we work with nurses who were really on the front lines of making identifications? So it became much more than my individual clients, and what I thought was really interesting was my clients wanted to be part of this process. And since I hadn't learned about trafficking in law school, and as I was driving around in squad cars identifying brothel sites, wondering how many of my other classmates were driving around to brothels the way I was, it just made me realize I was really, my mentors, my teachers were my clients. And that became really important in how I thought about this issue. So when the founder of what was then ECPAT USA announced she was stepping down after 30 years, one of the things that I really liked was that it was a survivor-informed organization. She had something called the Survivors Council, and I thought that's really where I want to go. I want to go upstream. I want to think about preventing this from happening in the first place. And I want us to be guided by people who have lived experience in this space. I spent many years working with clients, but I was never trafficked, right? And what I needed to do was have the opportunity to really listen to them, be guided by them, and together we could guide our organization to make policy change. So what do? We go to schools, we're engaged in education, the survivors help develop curricula for schools, for teachers, for parents, because parents are really concerned about online recruitment of their children and sexual exploitation. There's a tremendous amount of grooming and catfishing and what's now called sextortion, of saying, send me your photos or else. We're involved in policy work. So, you saw in the video my interaction with Matt Gates, who was really interested in this topic when was asking me a lot of questions, and the chair of my board was in the room texting me and going like, what's going on with you and Matt Gates? I'm like, I have to answer the questions, right? So, and then also working with the private sector, and it's been really interesting to see how private sector actually is really interested in this because they don't want to be seen as facilitating trafficking in their business model. And originally we had a lot of opposition, but then it started in the hotel industry as hotels were getting sued for allowing trafficking to take place, and there were judgments of millions of dollars. Hotels realized that doing the right thing was also really good for their bottom line. So I think I don't know if I'm at 10 minutes yet. 1 minute left. I have 1 more minute left? Okay. I'm really excited to be available to answer questions. We really want to engage parents. We want to engage families. What's ahead? What's interesting is that a lot of our allies are evangelical Christians, conservative Republicans. I mean, so I was up there with Graham. He's been a huge champion in this field. And so in this very polarized environment, we really want to be truly nonpartisan. We want to be the voice of reason. I want to be able to have a conversation with Matt Gates. It was a little weird, but I wanted him to hear what does trafficking actually look like and what does it not look like? Because this topic, even though it's a neutral topic, any child is vulnerable, it has been weaponized, and so we're really thinking about how to thread the needle and have these conversations in a way where people can really lean in and we can cross party lines and continue to protect our children.
Thank you.
First of all, I just want to say how delighted I am to be here, and Lori and I are in the same cohort, and I think I saw some of our other cohort 6. It's been an amazing couple of days of working together, learning from Ruth, and just having a chance to kind of cross-fertilize, step back, breathe, and learn. So I'm really grateful for that, and it's been fun too. So So my organization, the Abortion Coalition for Telemedicine, was started in the aftermath of the fall of Roe versus Wade and in reaction to what we think and know now is very much needed after the loss of our rights to abortion at the federal level. I've worked with some of you, I keep saying ever since the beginning of ACT, and it's been, less than 2 years, but it feels like a long time. But there are so many great allies and colleagues and supporters and in this room that, excuse me for abortion-splaining, but there's also, I think, a real need to get out the word about what telemedicine is and things. So after Roe fell, I was traveling around and talking with colleagues and women in the South who had been most directly and immediately impacted by these bans, like right after Dobbs came down. And I don't want to have rose-colored glasses about when Roe was the law of the land, because for 80% of the counties in America didn't have any abortion services, and the way that bans on abortion fall, they disproportionately impact women of color and the most marginalized women and teens. But as I was seeing more and more how our movement was reacting to the fall of Roe, and that there was such an emphasis on travel, and I had lived and worked in Ireland when abortion was banned. There was a constitutional prohibition in Ireland for over 20 years, 30 years, that equated the life of the so-called mother with the life of the so-called unborn. And so what you had in Ireland was what was called the Irish solution to the Irish problem. And it was a lousy solution. It meant that individual women traveled, and they traveled to England or they traveled to Spain and other places. And it was isolating, it was expensive, and it was not ideal care. And I started to see this being replicated, in particular when a colleague and ally from Florida called and said she had a young woman who was just over age 18 that was traveling from Florida to New York for an abortion, and she'd never been on a plane before. And she couldn't afford to bring anybody with her, didn't know anything about New York. For those of us with endless resources, so to speak, getting from the airport anywhere is horrible and a drag. So imagine being, just as a young adult going into a city, and that, really struck me as, we need to have more options. We need to do better. We are now fortunate to be living in a time where medication abortion is available, and it's safe, and it's effective, and it's affordable. And so my organization, the Abortion Coalition for Telemedicine, was set up to kind of support and expand access to medication abortion as an option for anybody who wants it. I work closely with my two doctor co-founders who are longtime abortion providers, Dr. Linda Prine and Dr. Maggie Carpenter. And, I see my role as an activist and a lawyer to respond to their needs, to respond to patient needs, and to really create this new model. And I want to walk through sort of how it works, because it's so simple. There are doctors in the room who know way more about medicine than I do, but for this part, nobody needs to know much about medicine. So basically how telemedicine works is a licensed physician or advanced care practitioner does a screening, either asynchronously through email or on a Zoom or a phone call. They make sure that the pills and medications are safe for the women. They send two different kinds of medications. One is mifepristone, which I think has become almost a household name as an abortifacient, and the other is misoprostol, which has also been used globally and safely for decades now. The process of taking medication abortion is described as sort of 48 hours of like a heavy period and with flu-like symptoms. And everybody's experience will vary. Often, people say, well, it's safer than Tylenol. Tylenol gets a bad rap, and if you look at I looked at the back of the package of Tylenol, and it's not that dangerous. But what I really like about working with doctors is that you get kind of scientific medical evidence, and that's becoming more rare and rare in this conversation around abortion rights as things have moved farther to the right in the government, and at least on this. You can do telemedicine abortion through 12 weeks. There's evidence globally that it can go even farther, up to 15 weeks. So I'm going to get away from the medicine and back to what I feel comfortable with, which is the legal part. I am a lawyer who's done reproductive rights work for decades in the U.S. and globally. And when I got introduced to my two co-founders, there was in New York State a bill that had been written that was for telemedicine abortion and to provide a shield for the providers. And these shield laws, which passed and was signed by Governor Hochul, has had a tremendously positive impact on the ability of licensed providers in New York to feel safe that they can send certified medications to women in all 50 states, regardless of zip code, regardless of ability to pay. And so we have seen an enormous uptick, and the shield law means that the doctors can't be criminalized in New York State, they can't have their license revoked, they can have civil lawsuits brought against them. And so what we're seeing is a fifth of all abortions in this country now are through telemedicine, and the numbers are growing. We're seeing about 10,000 women and pregnant people per month in southern states, in places where abortion is banned or restricted, able to access medications without travel, without shame, without stigma, and most importantly, without risk of being themselves charged with violating an abortion. It is not a crime in this country to take a pill to self-manage your care. It is a crime to give somebody that in certain states, and we do have a conflict of law, like New York says, telemedicine happens, they are shielded where the provider is. New York State is not going to cooperate if somebody from Arkansas comes with an arrest warrant for one of our providers. But there is that same disconnected law that we heard about, I think, earlier today when we were talking about marriage equality when that was part of the conversation. So I see this very much in the same framework around equitable access and really reaching the most marginalized populations, giving women the choice. Do you want to travel? Do you need to travel? Or do you have obligations such as childcare, education? Is your travel limited because you're in an abusive relationship or simply because you don't have the means or the ability to travel or you just don't want to? We're seeing women within safe states opting for telemedicine as well. So what ACT does is we work to keep these virtual clinics open. We are not a service provider ourselves, but we make their jobs possible by, we set up a medical malpractice company. We now run what is called the Bella Group, and that is a single-purpose malpractice insurance for providers who are doing telemedicine. It's affordable, and more importantly, it's mission-driven. So they know that if somebody comes after them with a medical malpractice, they have legal support. They have criminal and legal defense through what we created kind of a virtual law firm with two different law firms that are providing pro bono legal services. We provide space for them to talk about best practice, technical support. And so we're really, continuing on. Dark clouds are coming, no doubt about it. Abortion has been a little bit of the canary in the coal mine of democracy. It has always been a stand-in for control of sexuality, for control of human rights to decide whether, when, and with whom to have a child or not. But we're going to keep going. Our providers are mission-driven, and they, know that if they don't take some risk, if we don't all take some risk, then it falls hardest on those who are the most marginalized and the most under-resourced. I don't know if I have. Okay. I'm not going to tell you the details of what we're doing specifically, but I'm happy to talk more with people about how we're going to keep on keeping on and with a safe, affordable, and effective solution.
Okay. Before longer introduction from Marcy in 1 minute, but I just want to say, so you just heard from 2 members of Cohort 6. There are 10 members of Cohort 6 who saw them up on the screen, but in each case, these are women stepping forward, looking for an issue, whether in this country or in Israel, and shaping it into an organization with all kinds of ramifications. There are 4 or 5 members of other cohorts here, including Wendy, who spoke a minute earlier, but there's amazing work being done. I also want to highlight the fact that somebody who loved her time in politics and kept saying you don't need to go to law school to be in politics. I did not go to law school. I'm a trained social worker. But I want to highlight that in both Julian and Lori's cases, a woman lawyer was able in each instance to identify an issue that is frankly not on the mind of most men, period, much less most male lawyers, and take that and use their legal skills to address all of the ramifications of the issue, and that's very important. So now I get to introduce Marcy, who I've known, several decades of my life, Marcy, I want to take a step back because while I was thinking about introducing her, I wanted to make a point that some people in this audience know, because there are some people who are active with Illuminate all the time. But Illuminate's stated message and goal, if you look at the mission statement, is to not only move forward women leaders who are working with a gender lens and with a Jewish lens to make social change, but to educate women philanthropists toward that same end and goal. And you heard this morning from one of the Israelis, I think Tamar, that about 1% of Israeli philanthropic funding goes to women. The big number in New York, in America, is 2%. So the notion of where
and it hasn't changed for decades, just about as long as we've known each other.
Right. And Marcy has been her whole life a concerned activist and a philanthropist. I'm going to let you tell them your secret background in a minute. But she is a philanthropist who has come at, long before Illuminate existed, to be clear, come at philanthropy with just that perspective, which is it's wonderful to have resources, but in order to use those resources well, you have to educate yourself, you have to figure out the issues, you have to figure out the marginalized populations. And she's been doing that for decades on her own and giving to causes, and I know that because I've asked her for money about 4,000 times. But she has most recently picked up on the issue that is not always on people's minds because it's so hard to believe that we need it. But it's the question of having an equal rights amendment. So the best example that you have right now is that we use the New York State Prop 1 ERA to further protect abortion rights in the state and to be sure that they would be secure from the next crazy thing that happens in Washington. And that's a good example for why we need an ERA nationally, which people have been trying to do without enough success for decades. And so I want you to hear from Marcy as a really long-term informed activist philanthropist who knows where to put her time and energy and money.
Thank you. So nice to be here and to recognize some faces who were here earlier before the election when we talked about Prop 1 and tried to spread the word. It was very successful because we got 70% of the vote, even though there were those within the left of the Democratic Party who put in a lot of extra verbiage. A lot of people I spoke to as I traveled were shocked at the language in Prop 1 because they were not prepared. But thank goodness for New York, and New York, of course, was the first state to give abortion rights to women. When I remember in college going to Washington to rally for the ERA in 1970, 71, 72, New York State passed the right to have an abortion. So we have actually been a very progressive state, and it's
I have to interrupt. I'm sorry. I just have to do this, not very much, but that's exactly the right history. When you go home, in addition to everything else you're doing, Google a documentary. I'm sorry to say that, but Google a documentary called The Deciding Vote. Because in New York State, the deciding vote. In New York State, this is just because we were telling good news stories earlier about John Convening and whatever. In New York State, in 1971, New York, as Marcy said, was the first state to pass the right to abortion. It was done by one vote, I get chills when I talk about this because I spent 20 years in politics trying to get people to read this thing. It was done by one vote by Assemblyman George Michaels, not the singer, Assemblyman George Michaels, who said on the floor of the United States, of the New York State Assembly, said, Mr. Speaker, you'll see it in the movie, I wish to rise to change my vote. I realize I will lose my next election. And he represented Auburn, New York, which is a highly Catholic community in upstate New York. And his family, his daughter-in-law, at the Seder the night before, told him that he couldn't vote that way, the way he was planning to vote. And he changed his vote and he won by one vote.
Wow. Yeah. Sounds like the Declaration of Independence, right?
It was called the Deciding Vote, and it was in several film festivals this year. We thought it was going to make the Oscars, but it didn't.
Wow. And there's also the great one about Bella.
Yes.
Bella Abzug's documentary, which covers some of that. But anyway, fast forward. Not much happened in the Equal Rights Amendment, but it was clear to those who were part of that effort that every single law, every single piece of legislation, every single decision that's made that affects our lives is based on the foundational document called the Constitution. And without having equal protections under the law, we are putting Band-Aid upon Band-Aid upon Band-Aid on trafficking laws, abortion rights, everything you can name that relates to us and families, because we usually are the protectors of the family and of children. I mean, that's, we might want to share it, and hopefully we're all in relationships where that's kind of fun and nice, but it doesn't always happen that way. So it really occurred to me when I left corporate America after 35 years, and having done philanthropy since about 1982, I really took the advice of Carolyn Maloney, who said to me, Marcy, I have something for you. And if you know Carolyn, you know she said it just like that. And she said, we are forming the ERA Coalition, and I want you to call this number, and da-da-da. And I was like the 5th person in the room. And they didn't have to do much selling, because I was in, and we started organizing, and we connected all the people in the United States who were kind of fringy folks who had been working on the ERA since 1972. We started with once-a-month calls. We got to twice-weekly calls. And lo and behold, fast forward, we were able to get the last 3 states to satisfy Article 5, the requirement. I'm sorry if this is boring to those of you who know about it, but so we were able to get first Nevada, and then Illinois, and finally on January 27th of 2020, Virginia became the 38th state. And then, coincidentally, Bill Barr wrote a 38-page memo the same week telling the archivist that it was illegal to sign this amendment and send it out into the world as law. And that was that. And that's where we are today.
On what ground?
So we have,
Somebody said on what
ground? The expiration date. There was an expiration date put on first. The last date was 1982. And it's arbitrary. It's not a part of the language of the amendment. It is what I call an expiration date you see on a loaf of bread on the thing that you throw away. Yeah. You know, and that's kind of what the expiration date is for the ERA. And what we need to do that, and I can answer questions about why this is the best way to go, what we need to get rid of the expiration date is both houses of Congress. Because Article 5 says that an amendment is for the people and the House of the people. It is not a part of the executive branch. It's not the judicial. It is the voice of the people. So we can't just ask. I wish we could. It would feel good if Biden pushed it out there. And I know there's a lot of emails going around about that. And people feel, well, this is so frustrating and we really should do something. And let's just throw some spaghetti on the wall and see what sticks. I'll tell you what will stick. It'll be the Supreme Court will stick. Because if we do it that way, it's just going to get shot down and we will be able to confront after 102 years of having this ERA by Alice Paul, we'll be able to look face to face to a future where this 38-state struggle never happened. That's what the Supreme Court will decide. So we have to get the 2 houses in 2026. We have to start working now to make sure that the Democrats take both houses. We have to make sure that that's the way we go after the ERA's final being pushed out into the world. Both the Senate and the House have to agree. Now, the House has already passed it once, and the Senate, even with the Senate we have this past session, 53 votes, but we needed we needed 60. So I think there's a real shot, hard work, patience, focus, 2026, I think we can really get it done.
Thank you. Just to fast forward, we.
Oh, wait, Ruth, I'm sorry, I didn't say the organization. So, in 2020, I was part of starting this other organization that I'm really focused on now, called the ERA Project at Columbia Law School. It's a think tank, it's the only one in the country, believe it or not. There was never a think tank at a law school or anywhere else that focused on sexual law, interpret it, analyze it, and see how it applies. And we have been helpful to states in the last election, helping give states language for their abortion. There's 7 out of 10 states that got that, and also worked in New York with the language on Prop 1.
Okay, so I'm going to make 2 comments there. One is, that was just a great testament to legislative organizing and the need to work state by state. You should know that one of the members of cohort 5, so Frady Reese is the executive director of Unchained at Last. Very short version of her story from the Orthodox Jewish community in an abusive marriage, because women are married or girls are married against their will into bad relationships. And that's not always, but often. And she started to mobilize, and it's the same process that you heard really from all of the panelists. She determined that the way to do it was to get it out of the battle in the Orthodox community and address the issue, which was not addressed properly, against child marriage in every state. Most states do not have effective laws against child marriage, and she is going state by state, and she has won 13 states in the last 3 or 4 years, and that's another example of the kind of leadership that also relates to exactly what you're hearing here, that you have to use vision and determination, and then you have to use analysis and smarts to figure out what's needed to protect these things, not only for ourselves, but for women in much more vulnerable situations. So, you didn't do the tagline, so I'm just going to say.
Oh, sure. Wait, I'll do it.
Okay.
I'll do it, because I think it applies to everything. And I particularly use it with relatives who have health issues. I go, an educated consumer is our best customer. So
that is Marcy's dad, who is a fantastic philanthropist himself and the head of Syms. Yeah. Okay, so there's the tagline. It works for everything. Everything you're working in, everything we're talking about for social change. So what I'm now going to do is take questions, to either any of them individually, whatever. I'm watching the clock because at about 2, they're going to get hysterical because you have to be back in the other room for a really, really important arts panel. Just quick show of hands. How many people have seen stuff? Okay, well, you should be sure you don't miss it. And if you have seen it,
it's closing on January 5th.
Yeah.
Okay, so then use December to see it, and please take your daughters and your granddaughters to see it. I've now seen it twice, and I'm seeing it again over vacation.
Take your son.
Anyway, the part of the leadership of SUBS will be speaking, and then there will be a book presentation, so we have to go back in the other room. So I'm going to take questions, and at 2 minutes to 2, I'm just going to ask each of the panelists to tell you one thing that they want you to do. Back row first. Yes.
Hi, my name is Mindy Proper. Julie, this is for you. I'm speaking with an attorney just about things in general. He said one of the biggest threats to abortion rights is that the FDA comes out and takes the pills off the market. And so it's not through the Congress, it's not through the courts, it's through the FDA. Is that something that got veracity to it? Is that potential? Is that something you guys are looking at?
We've done a lot of scenario planning. We were hoping to go down the happy flower-filled path. America did not deliver that for us, but yes, there have been, mifepristone, which is one of the medications, has been a target of the anti-abortion movement for a while now, in part because it's safe and effective and provides, telemedicine and other ways. It's vital for miscarriage management care, and I think we've seen a lot of stories about women, and particularly women of color and women in marginalized communities, losing their lives because they are not getting miscarriage management. We're concerned about it, but we're strategizing. I work very closely with doctors. There are other medications that can be used, 2 others that we're looking at. What's the impact on patients? We're looking at, I work with doctors who say, don't tell me what to do, tell me what happens if I get caught. So part of that is looking at what other state level protections can we put in. There's a whole kind of range of strategies that we've been working on.
Is there any grassroots efforts that can be supportive to you and your organization as you go?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that we are new, and sometimes I feel like we are swimming upstream in our own movement, frankly. The reproductive rights traditionally has been very clinic-based, very brick and mortar, as we say, and has been slower to embrace telemedicine than we would like. And so I think now that telemedicine has just taken off, where it's 20% plus of abortions, we're in conversation. I've always been in conversation with the big motherships, with NARAL and Planned Parenthood and NAF, and we're seeing shifts, and we're seeing that if we don't, as a movement, embrace telemedicine, it's going to go to wherever on the web. It's not going to be mission-driven. It's not going to put women's health and safety at the front. So we are seeing that spread, and going to what my ask is, part of it is these conversations, is getting leaders, women in our community, women who embrace human rights and Jewish values, to really start talking more about this and normalizing telemedicine and being bold about stepping up for innovative solutions for these times.
Okay, right here, Sarah and Susan. Let's do two questions, and you've got them here if they're connected, not, they can remember two things.
My question is also legal about the SHIELD laws. I work for the Jewish Fertility Foundation, and we're very interested. There's a SHIELD law in Alabama right now protecting IVF and allowing doctors to do the procedures there. Are you seeing challenges to the SHIELD laws? Because I know that that's something we talk about a lot, that there's challenges to the SHIELD law coming in Alabama. So I'm just curious if you're seeing that going on.
This is for Lori. I was recently in Las Vegas for the first time in about 5 years, and I noticed both in the airport and in the hotel conference center, in 4 languages, in every bathroom, there's signage for help. Are the authorities there trained? Is there a concerted program so that actually when people call for help, they get it?
Okay, Lori, go ahead, and then Julie.
So, Las Vegas, not surprisingly, has a really significant problem around, particularly sex trafficking. There's also, somebody was talking to me earlier about labor trafficking. It's also an issue, but focusing on the sex trafficking piece, because Las Vegas is sort of, they tout that. Interestingly, people think that prostitution is legal in Las Vegas. It's not. It's actually legalized in 2 counties outside of Las Vegas, but it is not legal in Vegas. And so some of what we do is actually educate people about actually it's not legal. Unfortunately, I know parents who live in Las Vegas whose children in high school are being recruited into the commercial sex industry within Las Vegas with all sorts of promises of like what kind of glamorous life they're going to have, and then their kids get sucked in and they can't get them out. So we do have parents who are really begging us to come out and work with their schools and train them. And we are involved in working with airports, and also we rolled out a large project with mass transit. And I've been talking to the MTA. There's been some resistance from the MTA right now about doing this alertness campaign, but we are doing it in other markets. So hotels do get trained in Las Vegas. We have an online training program that's actually kind of considered sort of the gold standard for training in this area. It's free. It's available on our website, but we will also send, if there's a business that wants to keep it in-house so that they can keep track, we'll send them our program and they can track it. So this year we will have trained close to 2 million people in the hotel industry. So it's really made a big difference. Thank you. The name of the program, it's Your Role in Preventing Human Trafficking. But if you go to I can give you my card. If you go to our website, there's a drop-down bar that says training for professionals, and then and that program actually is available in 34 languages. So we really are trying to have it reach a broad audience. And we're also doing a lot of work. So with the airports, I've actually gone to airports to do inspections. So I was recently at scars at JFK. And I actually was in Las Vegas. I go to bathrooms all over the country, checking out stickers. And what's interesting is what's interesting is where are people placing the stickers? So I was in Houston. They're very proud of their signage. The signage it's like a big poster. When you walk into the women's bathroom, it's a big poster that's like facing the hallway. So I said to the guy at the airport in security, look, if I'm being trafficked and I'm walking into the bathroom, I can't stop at the entrance and say, oh, let me take out my phone and take a picture because people are watching me. So some of this is just, I think there's some really good efforts, but this is actually where it's important to have survivors, because survivors will come in and they'll say what's going on with these posters. And so we actually had survivors create our own poster campaign because they felt that some of the survivors said, I didn't know I was being trafficked. Like, that sticker wouldn't have actually meant anything to me because I didn't know what it was. So we've changed the language on some of our announcements, which is also on our website. I'm happy to share that as well.
Not yet, but we're preparing by getting practitioners to really work with lawyers to look at how to get their risk mitigated. We won't get to zero. We really want to protect patients, you know, if there is a challenge and they're implicated, even though they can't be charged with an abortion. We've seen over the years that women are charged with all sorts of crimes during pregnancy. So we have a lot of lawyers, and we're also working legislatively. We would love the Biden administration to work with us on a pardon for violations under the Comstock law, the zombie law that doesn't seem to stay in its grave. And we're working at the state level as well, even here in New York, to try to get doctors' names off the pill bottles as they send them. So it's all these, I keep calling it sort of throwing chairs in the way of the zombie that's chasing us. We just need more impediments.
I'm gonna keep doing this, I'm gonna take two questions, yours and yours.
Julie, quick question. You mentioned a lot of pro bono work done by professionals, but how are you funded?
Okay. We are funded by philanthropy, we're very grateful for, and we lean into a lot of pro bono legal services and comms and, you know, individual funding as well. But
For the medicine and for those.
so we're actually not service providers. We do provide some block grants to service providers so that they can cover women who can't pay because they'll offer sliding fees. But they get money from the women who can afford to pay $150 and they cover otherwise.
Okay, Chris and then Kim.
I just wanted to be clear that even if Biden could just walk in tomorrow and say, I'm going to make this pardon, couldn't it be overturned by the next administration?
A pardon cannot be. This is why I like doctors and lawyers working together, but it would only cover sort of past conduct in the past 5 years. So
Because they
it's
could go
another
after all of us.
chair, it's not a wall, yeah.
Kim.
So, Marcy, a question for you. So the expiration issue is a deal breaker, and so,
Because
correct?
yes.
And so Congress, you're saying both houses have to pass the actual amendment itself?
No, no.
What is it that they have to pass?
They have to pass lifting the deadline.
Okay, so getting rid of the expiration.
Just eliminate
Got
the
it.
deadline, yeah, eliminate the expiration date.
And is there a senator or House representative that's putting that forward?
Oh, yeah, they've been
Every
several,
time.
there've been several.
And so what's
And
going?
Schumer's been a big advocate, and Hakeem, I mean, they're all in favor, all the Democrats are, I'm sorry, it didn't start this way in 1972, but now this issue of changing the fundamental law to make sure that we have equal protection under the law is a Democratic issue. It's only Dems. It's easy to say what you have to do in 2026. If it doesn't have a D with a name, pass. That's it. It doesn't matter if you care about women. Because I really think that what we're, and I know this is dark, but I think what we're going to be experiencing, I don't think we're prepared for. And keep it simple. Just vote for the D, and we'll get it done.
All the way down the ballot.
All the way down.
So what's going on with the ERA right now?
All
right, I didn't get a nice
Question is,
Yeah, I'll come back.
I'll talk to you after.
Okay,
Go ahead.
a profit to pass, and I'm one of the board members. And my question is for Lori, in reference to the rape culture and trafficking. Would the being done for the perpetrator so that the perpetrator, so like we're getting at the source, because I was trafficked as a child. And so if I'm looking at like the person, what's going to be done for the person so that they're getting the care that they need, so that they're not reproducing that into our society and into our culture.
So you're saying what's being done for the person who was trafficked?
No,
Or the
perpetrator. The perpetrators. It's like, I did a lot of work on myself,
Yeah.
myself. Now, what's being done for the perpetrator, because they're producing that in society. They go to jail, and they create more of themselves in jail, and that person, somebody gets out of jail, and another one of them produced like a carbon copy.
So one thing that I had done with my clients and was really learning from them was typically, and first of all, let me start by saying I'm very sorry that this has happened to you, and thank you for actually being so brave to share it, because I have worked with many survivors, and they don't actually like to identify themselves publicly because people pile all these assumptions on them. But I think it's really important that your voice is heard, so that you realize these are human lives, and people matter. So I want to thank you for sharing that. So there are a few things. When I started doing this work, once the light bulb went off and I realized this is what was happening to my clients, we actually used the law to bring perpetrators to justice, which really had not been done in a very effective way. So I started working with my clients to say, all right, let's create an environment where you're comfortable giving your testimony, where you feel comfortable sharing the details. And my clients actually became really significant activists in terms of like forcing law enforcement to do their job and like doing their own research and identifying where the traffickers were located and like looking to share that information with prosecutors. So we actually changed the culture within both local law enforcement and also federal law enforcement, because all of a sudden, these law enforcement agencies were getting a lot of positive attention for having, arrested these perpetrators, prosecuted these perpetrators, and you're saying they're getting out of jail, like the men, and these were, in my case, it was primarily men who were trafficking my clients, although, but to be clear, women can be traffickers also, and in many cases, we're seeing family members who are trafficking their children. But with my clients, the men who were trafficking them are looking at sentences of at least 35 years. And I had a client who was trafficked by two brothers who both got life with no possibility of parole. And this had been somebody who she came to me after she was arrested for prostitution, and she was going to do time, and so then I had to bring in federal prosecutors to work with the local prosecutors to say, trafficking victim, drop the charges. So we're trying to shift the needle, and by educating law enforcement and explaining, like, you can use the tools that exist. I think the piece that's still missing is that under federal law, and in many cases under state law, people who purchase someone for sex are also traffickers if the person being bought is a child, right? It doesn't matter. So it doesn't matter if it's a 17-year-old child who agreed to this, not to, sort of reflect on any 17-year-old who's been recently in the news. But, if you purchase someone under 18 for sex, you're a trafficker under the law. And so that, candidly, has still been an uphill battle, and we're just really engaged in continuing to raise awareness about this. And I think actually, when we think about sort of an ask, what can we do? I think it's really making sure that we're holding authorities accountable and saying, you need to enforce these laws.
So that's Lori's final. I'm going to do this, and then you can talk individually. But that's
Yeah.
Lori's final moment, Julie, and then Marcy. Final.
I think I had my final moment.
Okay.
Share what you've heard. It's the support that I've gotten through Elluminate helps me be much better at what I'm doing, and that's already something. But there's so much leadership in this room. I think that kind of conversation around being bold, taking action because we can, and not giving away our rights, but making them really fight.
So to punctuate, you heard on both sides of me references to laws and rights, legislation. All of that resides initially with the Constitution of the United States. So as it relates to the future of women in this country, if we continue not to have equal protection under the law stated clearly in our federal Constitution, none of our federal laws will accurately reflect legal equality. They just won't. That's my final.
So, guys, we discussed two specific issues and one really broad perspective. I want to repeat what a little bit of what they said. There's ways to get connected with each of them in their efforts, but among the things you can do are to be an active ambassador on the issue. You spent a day here, you heard about issues here, you heard about other issues. You know hundreds of people, all of them will be at your Thanksgiving table, and they don't know all of these issues. And look for some airtime and start talking and spreading the word. You can do that. In several of these cases, you can find moments where you can actively volunteer. Since I'm the moderator here, I'm going to say what Marcy didn't quite say, and what Kim would join me in saying, which is work for candidates. Yeah. Across the country, I said this on a panel this morning, and Judy can pick up on it, but the history of American elections is that the House flips in midterm elections. The House is very, very close. We still have 2 California races to decide, believe it or not, but it's probably, and the Pennsylvania recount for the Senate, but it's probably going to be a margin of under 10 votes in the House. And we have to flip that in 2026, and it's doable. And then you have specifically an action that could be taken by the House and Senate that would make a difference for all of our lives. So that's, get involved on particular issues, think electorally for those of you for whom it makes sense. And then I want to say something about philanthropy. Everybody here, by definition of being here, is a supporter of Elluminate. Elluminate is an extraordinary organization, so that even though I'm an employee, which really works to highlight the work now of 60 women who are making social change in different areas. So if you support Elluminate, you are supporting that effort to find women who are making social change. Now I'm going off script. That does not stop you from finding particular causes from those 60 women and deciding to engage as a further philanthropist. Philanthropy in every instance makes a huge difference. That's why I made some emphasis on talking about Marcy's life as a philanthropist. We want philanthropists to become better and better educated as to what they can do. So I'm going to repeat where I started, just in case you came in late. 1% of Israeli philanthropic funding goes to support women, and we're so much better in America that 2% of American philanthropy goes to support issues directly related to women. So this is an area in which, as Elluminate grows, we hope to be more and more visible and articulate, which is where does the funding go. But meanwhile, everyone in this room, take a deep breath, everyone in this room is a philanthropist. It means you care about human beings and you're willing to do something to make a difference. That's what philanthropy means. So be an expansive philanthropist and invest your extra dollars in things that you care about passionately, because it will make a difference, as I said this morning, for lots and lots of women who are not in this room.
Members, if I may, politics is local, and I'm just going to call out Rachel Storch here, who's a Jewish woman running for city council here in New York. Make sure you're getting to know.
Right, and if you're in New York, we have city council races for all city positions in 2025, so you can, build your electoral muscle, so you do it in 25, and then you can do it in 26.
Yeah, thank you.